Alright, every once in a while I get comments on my videos that say something along the lines of, these are all good ideas, but Hoyo will never do this. And honestly, these comments have kinda rubbed me the wrong way for a while now. Even though it's a bit of a heavier topic, I felt that I wanted to talk about this because it's been bothering me, so here we go. I want to start by saying that HSR is one of my favorite games at the moment, but something I want to be clear about is that despite it being one of my favorites, I can still recognize the faults the game has. It's because it's one of my favorites that I enjoy discussing it, and also why I actually started this YouTube channel. If I didn't like the game, I wouldn't be playing it or covering it. I just want the game to be better overall, so that's where the sentiments I have about the game come from. That said, I feel like somewhere during the last few years of playing these games, there's been a shift in attitude throughout the community about what we should be okay with as players. It feels like every time something happens that people may be unhappy with, the discussion about it is met with a kind of stone wall where no one really cares to actually have a conversation about the issue. Personally, I think the shift happened back in Genshin's era as the top dog, where everything we said or wanted as a community basically just fell on the deaf ears of Hoyo. But that right there is what really gets me. It feels like as a result of that Genshin scenario, people are now unwilling or reluctant to really even discuss the possibilities these games have to improve or be better than they are. A lot of discussion is met with what I saw in those comments I mentioned earlier, and a lot of ideas are just simply shut down because there's not many people willing to stand up and actually talk about them. To me, it feels like we all got lost in the sauce somewhere and forgot that we as consumers have the power to actually speak up and discuss the issues we have with the products we're buying. And I want to note the specific wordage I use there. These games are products that we're paying for, whether it's with money or time. Like, if you're at a restaurant and your food is overcooked, you'll probably call the waiter and say, hey, I'm not gonna pay for food that isn't cooked properly, and the same thing applies here. We don't have to always be happy-go-lucky and positive about these games that have glaring problems that not only aren't being fixed, but also just don't get addressed to begin with. Remember, we went an entire patch with Aventurine being bugged and not working properly. Like, I'm sorry, but there's no defense for that. People paid for that character, be it through grinding to get currency by playing the game, or by spending their actual money, and for an entire patch he simply didn't work as advertised. And another example, even though I personally thought the story for the current patch of 3.0 was alright, it's pretty undeniable to say that the presentation of that story hasn't evolved at all from the older updates. We still have the same old thing where characters stand in a circle talking to each other and sometimes move their models a little, with short cutscenes interspersed throughout it, and a whole lot of black screen white text. There just really hasn't been any innovation, and furthermore, long-standing problems like that Aventurine bug simply go ignored until whenever Hoyo decides it's time to fix them. So this is where I personally feel that we as the consumer need to do a better job of standing up and actually saying something about it. Something else I want to call out before moving on is that I often see people discounting others' experiences. Something similar to, well, it's not a problem for me, so I don't care, or it doesn't matter. This is fairly common when talking about character strength. For example, you say, I can't clear MOC with Sela, and someone's response is, well, I can, so what's the big deal? Sure, it might have been a skill or build issue on the original player's part, but at the end of the day, how they felt was what was important. Another example would be something like the black screens I mentioned. I've seen people say, yeah, this sucks, and I want to see something there instead of a black screen. But then others go, well, there's not that many of them, so who cares? These kind of takes on the different topics really feel like they're attempting to invalidate how someone is feeling, and I really don't know if that's the way we should be responding to these problems. If someone has an issue, the solution isn't always in their hand. Part of that blame can lie with the company too. Like, a player should never feel like they can't do something, or think that they can't feel a certain way just because someone else has a different experience or opinion about it. Usually the people that complain about these things are people that want the quality of their experience to improve, and I really don't feel like that's something we should be taking away from them. And honestly, I think this is probably where we got lost. I've seen a lot of people under the impression that what they say and their individual opinion on a topic just doesn't matter because they're only one person with that opinion. But realistically, you have to realize there's plenty more people that will think the same way you do. They just might be in the same spot as you where they don't think it's worth to speak up anymore. But here's the thing, every voice matters. You don't have to stop playing or stop spending on the game to advocate for the change you want to see, but it's also completely valid to take a break until things get better. The important thing in either case is that you make your voice heard by talking about the issues or writing feedback. And I do want to be clear here, I am absolutely not saying that it is entirely on us to somehow change Hoyo's design decisions about this kind of thing, because they could very easily be better about this kind of stuff without our input, but in my opinion, we can all have a part in it. The power of the player base is only as strong as the amount of people actually participating in the discussions about the topics that we're unhappy with. If half the player base dislikes something, but only a small portion of that half actually speaks up, then the amount of people with the problem might as well only be that small portion. And that's why every voice matters. Like, I'm not saying we all have to collectively get together and start a boycott or something. I mean, we all saw how that went with Genshin. But what I am advocating for here is for all of us to simply speak up whenever we have problems with the game. Change will never happen if we as a community don't put our foot down and advocate for the change. Like, let me show you something here. The image on screen right now is a comment thread from the very first video I ever released on this YouTube channel. The person in the comment thread complained about me making a video about a concern I had at the time, which was power creep, which, lo and behold, is still very relevant today. My response was that when you have an opinion on something, it is always going to be better to speak up, and that is also still relevant today. I saw a problem, and while sure, nothing has really changed since, I still made my voice heard. HSR is a game that I love, and I only want it to improve, and it's not like I can go to the Hoyo offices and have a direct conversation with the developers. So this is all I've got to try and make any kind of change actually happen. I mean, at the very least, even if there continues to be no change, at least I can bring up these issues to make people more aware of them. I also want to point out that Hoyo isn't immune to mistakes. You can say all you want about them having some grand plan that the mistakes are intentional to try and funnel you through their different game offerings, but I really think it comes down to them just simply messing up sometimes, and furthermore, they've shown that with enough backlash over those mistakes, they are willing to change. The most prominent example I can think of is ZZZ. The TV mode in that game was extremely divisive. While some people did enjoy it, a lot of others didn't, and you could directly see that it affected how much money the game made through the different sources that track monthly income. And sure, a lot of the reason that change actually happened for ZZZ was because of the low profits compared to the other big Hoyo titles, but those low profits came as a result of a lot of people actually doing something. So I guess what I'm asking for here is just for people to say their piece about HSR too. If you want a non-Hoyoverse example, we can look at Wuthering Waves. WoW's launch was pretty disastrous to say the least, with the performance issues as well as the lack of content, but despite that, they managed to turn the tide and come back strong near the end of their 1.x patch cycle, and the game has received quite a bit of praise for its 2.0 relaunch. Even if nothing actually ends up happening and our words still fall on deaf ears, I personally still think that it's worth discussing topics like this, not just for the sake of trying, but also in hopes that the game we all love can be better than it is. I will always advocate for this, and I will also always say it's worth complaining about something that you have a problem with. Even if your voice is small and you're just one person speaking up, if there's enough people that are just like you, then that voice is going to be a hell of a lot louder. If you want change, then this is how we can do something about it. The point is to make it known that there is a problem, and then at that point, it's mostly out of our hands, but at least we did our part. Recently, it's felt like we've been spending a lot of time arguing amongst ourselves, trying to put blame on one person or another, or denying issues, when I feel that the better thing to do is work together as a community to try and solve these problems. Even if you personally don't see something as a problem, that doesn't invalidate anyone else's thoughts and feelings on whatever that problem is. So I really hope that going forward we can do a better job discussing these things without personal biases in mind and work together towards a common goal, improving the game. Really, the root cause of the issues these games have only comes from one place, and that's the companies that make them. All of these companies have choices to make when they design their games, and the ones that don't try to make the player experience better are the ones that we should be talking about and making complaints to. To wrap up, in my video discussing HSR power creep from a couple weeks ago, at the end of it I said we should be asking why we're dealing with all this in the first place. And the people we should be aiming that question to are the companies that create these situations to try and extract as much money as possible from their players. At the end of the day, all of these games follow a profit-first mindset, so if we let it be known to them that we're tired of whatever they're putting out, then that's when we're going to see the change. It happened with ZZZ, it happened with Wuthering Waves, and it can definitely happen with HSR too. Again, as I end the video here, I do want to reiterate that I really do love this game. I complain about it because while I do like the game, I only want to see it be better than it is currently. I would love nothing more than to see a renaissance for the game like ZZZ got in 1.4 or WoWa got in 2.0. So all I can do is make my complaints and then hope for the future. Anyway, that's my rant. As always, thank you very much for watching. Subscribe, join my Discord link down below if you want a place to hang out and chat, and if you haven't already, maybe give my other videos a shot too.